everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Charlie Giancarlo, who is the chairman and CEO of Pure Storage. Charlie, good to see you.
Oh, good to see you as well. Thank you.
I think you are my first standing interview this week. I want to just I know we're talking about the company, but I hope you're comfortable there.
You have me in my normal stance. I stand all the time. I have a standing desk. I'm a big pacer when I'm talking on the phone, which I prefer, frankly, over Zoom if there's no presentation. I'm pacing all the time, so it's just I get restless.
Fast-moving industry, and of course, much healthier for the body. So good for you. Well, listen, I want to start. Data centers was it 2% of global energy? I believe goes into data centers. Much of it's storage. Do you sort of feel like you are the villain or the hero or neither when it comes to sustainability? And because obviously we're going to be needing more of your services in the future as we get into AI and just the volume of data that we're processing.
Yeah, well, in our case, we're definitely the hero. And just to give you a sense of that, Pure Storage was founded on the belief that flash storage, which is a semiconductor, it's the same storage that you have in your iPhones, was going to take over the world in terms of data storage. Now, even today, even though that it's done so largely on high performance applications, 90% of the world's data is still on magnetic storage, including everything in the hyperscaler. Our technology literally uses 1/10 of the space, power, and cooling of magnetic storage. So, the big data centers.
Can I unpack that a little bit for the layperson? Magnetic storage. Who are the big names in magnetic storage? Like, I just want to kind of right size, because when I hear that, I obviously think about storage on my phone, but I don't know about the ecosystem. Go ahead.
Seagate, Western Digital, people that are a little bit older will remember they used to have external hard drives. If you're a little bit older than that, you used to have a hard drive even in your laptop computer. Nowadays, laptop computers are all flash. But most of the data storage in enterprises, for mass storage, and 90% of the storage in hyperscalers is magnetic storage because it's been historically cheaper. But now we're at the point where we can replace that with so-called flash storage. And as I mentioned, it's 1/10 of the space, power, and cooling. Now, the big data centers pay dozens of people a lot of money every year to try to reduce the data center power requirements by 0.5%. And by simply replacing magnetic storage now with flash, they could reduce the data center footprint by 20%. So we're talking about a massive amount of power savings and space savings, which is just as important in data centers.
So let me ask you. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. Sorry. If you'll finish your thought.
No. This is your interview. I did finish.
Well, one of the questions that I have is really Pure Storage. I understand it's a B2B company. When you think about having a seat at the table, what is it that you want investors to know about your company? Like, what is it that's going to get you on the radar as they're thinking about where to put their money? I'm just going to start with, because there's many different stakeholders you have, but one of the big stakeholders is people betting on your future and betting on your growth.
Right. We are very fortunate in we've had a steady set of long-term shareholders now for many years who've actually believed in our mission. And I have to tell you, as a CEO, there's nothing better than having investors who believe in your mission. And our mission is really to completely transform the nature of enterprise data storage. So what does that mean? Well, data storage is really relegated to the back rooms, if you will. It is very fragmented. It turns out to be quite complicated. And all of the major players in the industry had stopped investing in it quite a long time ago, relegating it to a commodity, saying it's a commodity business, so we just want it to be cheap. We're not going to invest a lot of money in it. And it doesn't operate the way that you and I as consumers interact with storage today. When we interact with storage, we go to the cloud, and if we want
it'll
more,
cost you.
it'll cost you, but it's not a lot of trouble. You just put more on there,
Yep.
right? Whereas in the enterprise, if you want more, it takes a lot of work. There's a lot of analysis that goes into it because different types of storage, high performance, low performance, different protocols require completely different systems.
Yeah.
And that makes it complicated. We are the one company now that can deliver a single platform with a single software environment, one set of what are called APIs to program to, for all of an enterprise company's storage needs. And one last thing, we make it inside that company look like a cloud of storage, as opposed to lots of fragmented environments.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, we call it the cloud operating model. And we allow our customers to operate their data, to manage their data like a cloud of data, which sounds like it should have been done a long time ago, and it probably should have. But we're the first ones to enable this for major corporations.
Let's go back a bit, because I want to be cognizant of not making it too much a platform. And you're doing a great job, but to sort of sell the product to CIOs, which is obviously a big part of our audience. And you're right, legacy systems are a huge challenge. I want to talk more personally. What was the Eureka moment for you? Because you talk about it being a commodity business.
Right. Well, I joined Pure about 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And at that time, I had no familiarity with data storage. I came out of the networking industry.
Yeah.
I did some private equity for a while. And frankly, storage was the furthest thing from my mind. But when Pure called and I started looking into it, I saw two different things that for me indicated that we could really transform what is a major industry, 50 billion or more, in annual sales. Those two things were, first of all, this conversion or evolution from magnetic disk to flash. Because when you go from a mechanical device to a semiconductor, to a chip, you can really, the chips are so much more powerful than mechanical devices that it opens up a big opportunity. But the second one was that what I saw was a very fragmented industry where the different components didn't interoperate with one another. And so coming from the networking industry, and frankly, I was very fortunate. I was part of, the company that took communications from a very fragmented industry and brought it all to internet protocol, to the internet, right? And I saw the same opportunity with storage, to take it from a very fragmented industry with different products for different purposes and bringing it with this use of flash technology to a single integrated environment for customers' data.
Part of it is I'm thinking of Cisco going from a router company to being the backbone of the internet. Part of it is a marketing, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but it's reframing how people think about what you do.
Right.
I'm sitting here thinking, why would the average person who is not a CTO or a CIO care about Pure Storage? And I don't mean that as a harsh confrontational question, but genuinely it's challenging, I think, for enterprise tech companies to get on the radar, and yet it's important, I'm sure, from a talent perspective and many others. What message do you have when people are looking at you even as a place to work?
Well, I would say that your question reminds me of a story, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure. And
the story
feel free, give it out, dish it out to me.
Okay, yeah. This is a true story. I remember when I was first getting going in my career, and I had started a company, and I met with a distant relative for the first time, and we asked each other what we did, and it turned out that he was actually a plasma physicist at Princeton University, and he was working on fusion, which we all know, right? Fusion energy. And of course, I was suitably impressed. And he asked me what I did. And this is quite a long time ago. And there really wasn't a word or a phrase to describe what I did. So I said, look, I'm working on technology that allowed computers to talk to one another. And he told me many years later that he walked away from that meeting and said, yeah, that'll never work out. Why do computers need to talk to each other? And of course, that eventually turned into all the technology that created the internet, right?
Yep.
We think about it's hard for people today to think of life without the internet, right? And what the internet did and internet protocol did was consolidate, voice communications, video communications, wireless and wired communications, and it pulled it all together. Well, with data storage, with data being fragmented, think about the way that gets in the way of AI, of generative AI, of really making Chat GPT, more and more effective as people come to rely more and more upon artificial intelligence to help us with our jobs, with our everyday lives. If data is fragmented, then the ability of that technology to move forward is going to be challenged. So what we do, what Pure Storage does, which admittedly may occur in the engine room and therefore not necessarily be top of mind to everyone, is we allow companies to make better use of their data each and every day and spend less money doing it. Make it easier and less expensive for them to do.
So you talk about the challenge being the fragmentation. I would have thought that volume is the challenge, the capacity is the challenge. And so let's get to the generative AI and, whether it's 5G, all kinds of conversations. One of the things that is the first challenge we always talk about is the capacity and the energy that is needed and the capacity that is needed to process this data. You're saying fragmentation is the problem? I mean, there are different problems.
I think there are different problems and both exist. About 20% of, you quoted this at the beginning, about 20% of data center power and space goes to data storage.
Yeah.
It's too much. Now that we have an alternative to that, at 1/10 the power and space, why wouldn't we use that, right? If it's roughly the same price. And as data continues to grow, there is another study that says that at the current pace and speed, data would be 40% of data center space and power. And obviously that's just too much. So reducing, and furthermore, if we're able to reduce power by that amount, I mean, obviously that's good for everyone. It's good for the planet. It's good for the companies that we sell to. So we're very focused not only on continuing to be the best in this area, but continuing to reduce the power per, we call it terabyte, which is an amount of data, the amount of power that one burns for a set amount of data.
Can I ask, Charlie, when I speak to people in the tech industry, talent is always, of course, one of the major concerns. What keeps you up at night?
Let's see. What keeps me up at night is our ability to. Honestly, it's interesting. It's our ability to tell our story in a way that's meaningful to our customers. We operate in a very old industry where doing the same thing day after day, year after year, has been the way that people have operated for the last 40 years. Data storage has been bought and sold the same way for many decades. And our story is actually quite different. And really making that understandable and digestible by our customers is something I spend a lot of time on.
Well, it gets to what your physicist, I guess, relative, inertia is a powerful force, as you know, but yet we're at a time of incredible disruption. So help us look around the corner a bit as to, what should we be paying attention to? Let's even start with the 202 area code, Washington. Is the regulatory environment conducive to the kind of growth that we need in these areas?
I would argue that the regulatory environment has really not been cognizant of what it needs to do to really encourage American ingenuity, American technology, but also American manufacturing, right? If you were to take just the sum total of not just regulatory, but tax policy, which barely changes at all, that has encouraged American companies to go overseas for decades, right? And of course, the rhetoric you'll hear from Washington is, well, industry's bad because it's gone overseas. Well, industry responds to economic stimulus and to economic cues. And if all of the tax laws are structured in such a way where it is far, and remember, American companies have to compete, not just in the US, but on a worldwide basis. And if the economics are structured in such a way that American companies have to go overseas to compete, well, that's exactly what they will do. Really, it's time, I think, for the government to look at not just regulations, but also tax policy, and look to see what needs to be done to change tax policy to make onshoring more economically viable. And I really believe one of the things, and you mentioned the availability of talent, one of the things that tax policy has done has made U.S. workers far more expensive than workers around the world. And if we want to see more employment in the U.S., if we want to see more manufacturing in the U.S., the government should look at ways of reducing the cost of U.S. employment.
How do you reduce? I mean, there seem to be two forces at odds with each other. And it's interesting. I remember this being a debate 2 decades ago when we were talking about offshoring, and I would have thought with the pandemic, it seems that with supply chain and other considerations, we've actually had more onshoring, nearshoring. So let's start with that fact that has the pandemic and the challenges around the supply chain not changed the economics somewhat of where you locate your manufacturing facilities or storage?
I would say it's been more about import-export restrictions that has done more, and frankly, intergovernmental relations that has changed the nature of where products are being manufactured. And there have been a very small number of very specific stimulus programs, but there's been nothing done at a more fundamental level. For example, the payroll tax, 15% tax on labor. Applied equally across the board. Well, why not start with eliminating it for manufacturing employees? That would reduce the cost of manufacturing overnight in the U.S. by about 15%. And
that's
there
a good
other
idea,
tax laws,
or an idea. I'm not partisan. Go ahead.
Well, and I consider myself politically incompetent. So, whether or not
agnostic is the term, Charlie. Agnostic, not incompetent.
There you go, agnostic. But the ability to get these things through in a divided political environment, very challenging. But something that should unite us all is we'd like to see more onshoring of our talent. And there's an old phrase, right? Whatever you tax, you get less of. Well, if we tax labor, we get less of it. And, it's time to create an environment where we have more labor, not less.
Well, you mentioned intergovernmental, and I'm just following my curiosity here, having lived in China for several years. I hear a lot about the politics around China, not so much about the innovation in the business environment at the top level. What are you thinking about with regard to China or Asia? I mean, tell me sort of, when we say intergovernmental, where are your sights drifting when you get outside the U.S.?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I've done a lot of business in China, all around the world, and certainly with Cisco. I opened up major development centers in both China and India. Today at Pure, we do not sell in China. Now, we do support multinationals in China, but we don't sell in China. And you might ask why. It's not a political bias. It's that I don't believe that in our business, we can actually make money in China because of all the challenges of operating under the current set of rules in the Chinese environment. That being said, I think the Chinese themselves, very innovative, very hardworking, very clever, and they are a force to be reckoned with. Now, it's true. I mean, the U.S. has been the most innovative nation, really, not just for decades, but probably for a century. And that momentum certainly continues. And we certainly want to protect as much of that as possible. That being said, though, we don't have we don't have a manifest destiny to being the most innovative in the world, and we have to continue to invest and to protect our intellectual property.
Yeah.
To be able to continue that. China's a very competent, let's say, competitor. I'd like to think of them in those terms. We shouldn't make them an enemy. We should make them a good competitor. But because of what the Chinese are doing themselves, we're starting to see a lot of business leave China, right? So a lot of the contract manufacturing that had entered China is now moving to Southeast Asia, moving to Mexico, moving to Eastern Europe. Personally, I believe this is generally a good thing. We're seeing a greater diversification of contract manufacturing. I think we're going to continue to see that, not because of the way the West feels about China, but the way that China is operating internally, making itself less friendly to outsiders. And I do think that we also have demographics working in our favor. I
We
like
being
to
the
treat
U.S., basically? When you say we, the U.S. has
the
demographics
US.
working in its favor. Oh,
Yes.
so certainly I know but I did see in your background India. I'm curious about how you think about India and Modi. I mean, there's clearly a huge amount of success in the U.S. with Indian-born CEOs, startup entrepreneurs, and India is very much coming on the radar too as a competitor and an ally to the U.S. How do you think about it from your business standpoint, Charlie?
Yeah, well, India we have a major facility in Bangalore in India. Our major facilities are west coast of the U.S., Bangalore in India, and Prague in the Czech Republic in Europe. The way we think about, I think, all of these environments is that they contribute strongly to Pure's success. The way I think about India is it's a developing economy. If you're a developing economy, working with the West, working with the U.S. is completely in your own national interest. When you start to become on the same par, when you become a developed nation, then there's that whole issue of coopetition, right? Mm-hmm. On one hand, you want to cooperate. On the other hand, you're going to have competitive interests. I think we have to keep it at the competitive level and not at the antagonistic
I think that's
level.
fair.
We have to be about identifying enemies. I think we're more competitors than enemies.
One of the things that's interesting in your role as a global CEO is that ability to connect the dots. And you've mentioned, Web 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. There's a real curiosity, I think, as to where are we at this stage of innovation and stage of the economy. And let's talk about, the innovation. There's been, on the one hand, a lot of euphoria about this next wave of innovation made possible through things like generative AI. And yet, some trepidation as to our ability to really maximize. And that, what are you seeing, given your perspective? Do you feel like this is a stage of incredible growth that we're entering, or something else?
You may remember, I think it was only 10 years ago, where a number of economists were saying, we're not seeing this high-tech dividend that everybody promised. That's going to make life easier, that's going to reduce the cost of doing business and so forth. I think we're starting to see that high-tech dividend. And Gen AI is another area, or ChatGPT, another area where it will reduce the overall complexity of businesses, enhance our productivity as a nation. I might mention one other thing. I do remember an interview once with Alan Greenspan, and he said that, early in his career, he had studied the development of productivity over 100 years, and specifically American productivity. And he goes, productivity is what eventually leads to a better lifestyle. It's what leads to wealth. And he goes, no matter what 20-year period he studied, productivity only grew at 2% a year. And he said he questioned this for years and asked himself why. And he said he finally came up with the answer. He goes, we're just not that smart. Meaning, be able to grow faster than 2%. So what I think technology is doing, and in particular what this latest advance in ChatGPT will do, is allow us to continue to operate, to grow productivity, at a good rate, at 2%. Who
2%?
knows?
Are you in the 2% Alan Greenspan school?
Well, I'm a student of history. I would hope that we're better than that, but these long-term curves have a habit of staying, on a straight line. So 2% or better, but I think we're going to see some benefit of that. And I think we're going to see
Okay.
some, you can be better than 2% for a number of years. I'm thinking we're going to get there.
I'm thinking that you're better than 2%. That's a great tagline. Let me go to the economy now, because again, you are on the front lines. Your customers are very much reflective of the challenges and the opportunities. What are you seeing in the U.S. and beyond? I think there's a lot of uncertainty.
There's a fair amount of uncertainty, and what I'm seeing is a bit of a pause, not a panic, not a full recession. We know what those look like. I've gone through, unfortunately, a few too many of those in my career. But a bit of a pause. But I'm actually very optimistic. I expect the economy to pick up next year and the year after that. The resilience that we've already seen has been in the face of high inflation, the resilience in spite of the pandemic, and I think this might be part of, in fact, the high tech dividend, right? That despite, unparalleled retreats of some or disadvantages, the pandemic, the high inflation that was caused by that, major war in Europe. And despite that, we're still growing. So that to me says there's a lot of resiliency in our economy right now. And I think we're going to see that come back.
Okay. And let me thank you for your time and for letting me drift a little into areas that are interesting to me, hopefully to our audience. Where are you right now? I'm looking at your backdrop. I take it you're on the West Coast at the moment.
We are.
I'm very curious about the state. Silicon Valley is always associated with San Francisco, which has had some challenges, and every different hub wants to be its own version of Silicon Valley. What is the future of the part of the world where you are right now? Both, what gives you pause and what gives you hope?
Thank you. Well, I'm originally from the East Coast. I'm originally from just outside New York City.
All right.
Wonderful growing up out there. But my wife and I have been out here now for 35 years, firmly ensconced in Silicon Valley. And honestly, Silicon Valley, when I came out here, it was vying with Boston and Research Triangle Park and Dallas Fort Worth,
right,
for high tech supremacy. And I would say that for the last 20 or 30 years, there's been no question that Silicon Valley is the leader in high-tech innovation, and frankly continues to be. I would say it's almost never been healthier. Even though there are other hubs now that are being generated, Silicon Valley still leads. You're right, San Francisco certainly has seen better days. Used to live in San Francisco quite a bit. I rarely go up there now. The city's in bad shape. Really, it's honestly city leadership that is lacking. It really requires a refocus on quality of life in the city for the people who live and work in San Francisco. And undoubtedly, at some point, the city will elect an administration that focuses on that. So we've seen that in New York. I remember moving away from New York in the 80s, and which is when Escape from New York, a famous movie, came out.
Right,
we
right.
About that.
And then came Giuliani, who was America's mayor. I have to point out, it was the man we talk about today is not the mayor that we were talking about necessarily in the late 90s. So
right, but within one administration, it went from being an extraordinarily dangerous and gritty town to becoming, adult Disneyland. I mean, really a safe and pleasant place to visit, where even young ladies could walk anywhere in the middle of the night and not be afraid. I think San Francisco needs to go through a similar renaissance.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So to finish up, let's. I always love to know what's on your radar that you would put on ours that we haven't addressed. Of course, we touched early on sustainability, and you are front and center, and I understand the role that your company plays in that. Is there anything else that you're keeping your eye on that we should too?
Well, I know you cover this in other areas, but I think digital currency is coming closer and closer. That's an area that I'm very involved in and engaged in. I do believe that that is another area that's going to create a huge amount of flexibility and efficiency in the economy overall.
It's got a bad rap right now, right?
Well, yes, for a good reason. It has a bad rap for a good reason, but that is, there have been a lot of, whenever you have something new, often you will have a lot of people with questionable motives getting involved in it. But that being said, the technology itself can be very solid and is certainly going to be part of all of our economic future.
Now, forgive me, I have to ask one. When you say you're fairly, in what capacity are you involved in it? Forgive my ignorance.
All right. Well, I was one of the founders of what's called the Digital Dollar Foundation, which I founded
mea culpa.
With my brother Chris Giancarlo, former CFTC chairman, and one of his partners, David Gorfine, and along with Accenture, we've been piloting experiments around the world with digital currency to really create an environment where we better understand what kind of effect it will have, both on our world as businesses, but also as consumers, making it easier to have payments around, making it easier and expensive to pay bills, to give money. It's been a fascinating journey, still a lot more to go. But very pleased with.
Okay, and this is accretive to. This is an addition. This is accretive to your day job, or it's in addition to your day job.
Yeah, it's my weekend activities. Yes.
Well, there you go. A man of many talents, and I really appreciate your good humor, your insights, and certainly helping us to see around the corners. So, Charlie, thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you. It's really a pleasure talking to you.